In the city, affairs of the heart must be addressed. In the country, trashing the house is the divisive issue. Things always turn out differently in Always Greener, tonight on 1.
Tonight on One News, our biggest company shrinks in the capital. Hundreds of workers face the chop.
Checking into the benefits of a Trans-Tasman Air Alliance. Will it be just the ticket for travellers?
It's not our fault why Miss New Zealand says beauty can't be blamed for deadly riots in Nigeria.
This world has got nothing to do with it. We've been dragged into it yet again.
And who's the sexiest of them all? The survey that reveals our secret desires. It's our biggest company and a big player on the world scene.
But today, Fonterra has delivered a huge shock to hundreds of families. The dairy giant has announced it's getting rid of hundreds of workers and moving the headquarters of its manufacturing arm, NZMP, out of the capital. Half its Wellington staff will lose their jobs. Another 200 workers will be forced to move north. Economics correspondent Mike Jaspers has that story.
Heading back to work after getting the news they dreaded at Wellington Stadium.
The last few weeks, everyone's been a little bit down, and I guess they're pretty much expecting this.
400 staff now face a different future. 200 will lose their jobs. Another 200 will be offered work in Auckland and Hamilton.
I don't have kids, I don't have a mortgage, so I'm not really fussed.
But for many, shifting north is a difficult prospect.
I'm true Wellingtonian, so just have to weigh up your options for the future.
What are you going to do? Stay here where there's it's a real city, isn't it?
Fonterra boss Craig Norgate delivered the bad news. Farmers have demanded he cut costs.
There are savings when you start talking about less staff, but the fundamental reason for the change is about becoming a more effective and efficient business. So really about being able to service customers better, about driving the business forward better.
NZMP is Fonterra's powerhouse, turning the country's milk into powder and other ingredients. It'll now be run from Fonterra's Auckland headquarters. Pastoral House, NZMP's home in Wellington, will be sold.
This should have been done, you know, within the first 90 days, I guess, of the merger of the three companies. There were no options. It had to be done somewhere along the line.
But it's another blow for the capital. Westpac is moving 50 senior staff to Auckland. Last year, NZ shifted its HQ to Hawke's Bay.
I don't understand the rationale behind their decision. This is IT jobs, it's administrative jobs, it's about selling to the world. They do not need to move to Auckland to do that.
Fonterra at the end of the day isn't about Auckland, Hamilton, Palmerston North or Wellington. It really is about a New Zealand company doing business in the wide world.
But when a business makes tough decisions, it's workers that feel the pain. Mike Jaspers, One News.
And Fonterra says the job cuts and shift north won't be immediate. They'll happen over the next 2 years.
And while workers at Fonterra digest today's announcement, debate goes on about the big changes being planned for Air New Zealand. It's been a day of analysing the detail of the planned alliance between Air New Zealand and Qantas. They claim it'll bring $1 billion into the New Zealand economy, another 50,000 tourists and many other benefits. But passengers and business leaders fear ticket prices will rise and schedules will change. Business correspondent Owen Poland reports.
It's been just a month since Air New Zealand's new low fares began. Now travellers worry about losing them because of the Qantas deal.
In a monopoly situation, you expect prices to go up. There's no incentive for them to maintain cheap fares or good service.
Air New Zealand says the cheap fares are here to stay, but consumer groups want written guarantees.
We need something either in regulation or some contract with the company, between the company and the government, to ensure that the interests of the New Zealand consumer are protected.
Well, I think it's quite irresponsible to even suggest that. We are certainly making a commitment about our approach to the business, the bold new approach that we've taken with Air New Zealand Express.
And the consumer groups aren't alone. Business leaders also want protection.
We spend around $10 million a year. A lot of that is trans-Tasman, also inside of Australia and inside of New Zealand. So we would have any concerns if there was any suggestion that the costs were going to increase in that area.
Claims that the local economy will benefit by $1 billion over the next 5 years come in a draft report commissioned by the airline. But the business community wonders how their freight needs will benefit.
The planes are getting smaller, more bums and seats, what sort of space are they going to give us for our freight? That, you know, we're making international money for this country. We need to have some assurances.
Part of the deal also involves Air New Zealand taking over 20% of Qantas's engineering work, but there's scepticism about who'll step into those 200 new jobs.
I think it's a big ask for Air New Zealand. In fact, I think it's a big ask for New Zealand in total. We're running out of skilled labour. We're not training people as we were in the past.
Australia's competition watchdog has already expressed his concern about the lack of rivalry.
On the face of it, the transaction will lessen competition in several markets, certainly in the Trans-Tasman route.
We understand the public concern. We are determined to meet that public concern, and I think the actions of Air New Zealand in rebuilding the business are testament to that.
But one victim of the perceived monopoly could be Virgin Blue. The cut-price airline is heading to New Zealand in the coming weeks to lobby politicians against the deal. Owen Poland, One News.
Meanwhile, Virgin Blue is fuming over speculation that Air New Zealand wants to sell it Freedom Air as a way of neutralising its opposition to the alliance. Freedom Air is Air New Zealand's cut-price Trans-Tasman service. Virgin Blue says any offer is premature and offensive.
We think it's a bit presumptuous of Qantas and Air New Zealand, after trying to tie up a monopoly, to decide what's best to keep our silence. Clearly, that's a little bit precious of them.
Virgin Blue says it still wants to fly in New Zealand, but not at any price.
And the government could have a hard job convincing the public the Qantas buy-in is a good idea. One of the parties the government depends on for support is now demanding the airlines offer written guarantees about fares and services. And a One News Colmar Brunton Snap poll shows the public shares its concerns. Here's political editor Mark Sainsbury.
While Air New Zealand and Qantas keep making reassuring boarding announcements, the political pressure continues.
I think that if the airlines are so confident about the deal that they've struck being in the interests of passengers, they will give them a written guarantee to that effect.
While the government's partner puts the boot in, calls for restraint from an unexpected quarter.
What you've got is parties prepared to beat their gums regardless of what they don't know.
New Zealand First promising to research the deal before judging, but elsewhere views are hardening. Both the airlines and the government know this will be a hard sell. So what about public opinion? Think of it as this aircraft. When we asked whether people agreed with selling 22.5% of Air New Zealand to Qantas, about 26%, that's a quarter of this aircraft, agreed it was a good idea. But when you start toting up those opposed to the sale, those who don't think it's a good idea to sell out to Qantas, you get up to about here. That's 59% think it's not a good idea to sell those Air New Zealand shares to Qantas. But if Qantas did come on board, would they act in the best interests of Air New Zealand? Back to our cabin. 28% believe Qantas would act properly, but 59% do not believe the Aussies would act in Air New Zealand's best interests. Academics point to Canada, where a merger of the two main competing airlines has since caused fare rises and public disquiet, which means the government here must persuade the public.
It's something that we hold very dear to our hearts, and I think from a political perspective it's important that a good job is done at trying to sell this deal to the public.
Mark Sainsbury, One News.
In other news, the warnings have been delivered. Now the experts are preparing to go in search of Saddam Hussein's weapons. The first team of UN inspectors will begin their work tomorrow, somewhere in Iraq. And a few hours ago, the inspection chief emerged from a Security Council briefing in New York, saying there would be no hiding place.
Any indications of where we might be going or what types of places we'll go to are speculations. And that we are not going to tell. The Council authorizes us to go anywhere, anytime, and we intend to do so.
UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan says full cooperation from Iraq is in the interests of the Iraqi people and the whole world. It's 4 years since inspectors were last in Iraq, but this time things are very different. The BBC's Ben Brown is in Baghdad.
A moment of history in the long struggle between Iraq and the outside world as the first weapons inspectors finally arrived here at Saddam International Airport. Just 17 of them on the plane today, but 300 more to follow. Chemists, biologists and nuclear scientists. Their mission to scour Iraq for weapons of mass destruction. The Iraqis say they will cooperate with this mission. The inspectors will believe it when they see it.
We don't believe words, we believe actions. We believe what we can see with our own eyes.
Nowhere is off limits to the inspectors, not even Saddam Hussein's vast presidential palaces. But Iraqis we spoke to today insist there are no weapons of mass destruction to be found.
We don't think so, because we were very serious when we invited them to come and inspect everything here. If there was something wrong, we could not have done this.
If they come here and find nothing, is that good for Iraq?
Of course it's good. And we are sure that there's nothing. I want you to do believe there's nothing. You're not going to find anything.
But the pessimists here believe that whatever is found, there will be war with America, come what may.
The weapons inspectors are supposed to give their first report to the UN Security Council by January 27th.
A man who says his work at a Dunedin funeral firm left him depressed and suicidal years later is now suing the company. 31-year-old Peter Urbani is seeking $180,000 in damages. He claims he was exposed to shocking and traumatic sights when he worked at the firm 15 years ago. Natalie Crook reports.
Peter Urbani was just 16 when he started work as a trainee funeral director. He says he'd sought the job at Gillian & Sons but left within a year, and says it was only years later he realised the effect of the work. His statement of claim to the court says he was exposed to horrific, traumatic and shocking sights, affected by the continuing exposure to the sounds, smells and experience of dealing with death. Peter Urbani says he turned to a life of crime, suffered depression and became suicidal, and that when he sought help last year he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder caused or contributed to by the experiences in the morgue. Gillian's is denying most of his claims, and in its defence says Peter Urbani was placed with them under a short-term Department of Labour work scheme, that there's no way any alleged psychological damage was foreseeable. The case is the first of its kind in the industry. Funeral directors say it's already had an effect.
Where the implications do come in will be a lot of firms, our members, and a bit like our company at this stage, and have not been for the last 6 months, taken on any work experienced people. That for the same reason as what this company is facing at the moment.
It's likely the civil suit will end with a reserved decision. Funeral directors, though, will watch closely for the outcome. Natalie Crook, One News.
An angry Miss New Zealand says Miss World contestants have been made scapegoats for religious rioting in Nigeria. The contestants have fled to London after an article in a Nigerian newspaper triggered riots in which 200 people died. Europe correspondent Ian Sinclair reports.
All this way, please.
Miss World contestants safe and sound in London after escaping riots in Nigeria. Among them, Miss New Zealand, Rachel Hewlett. She says contestants aren't to blame for the trouble triggered by a local newspaper article on the contest.
It's not happened because of Miss World. Miss World has got nothing to do with it. We've been dragged into it yet again. I mean, Miss World always gets dragged into it negative. But, you know, we all know here that it's not our fault.
Like others, she saw nothing of the clashes and had mixed feelings about leaving.
At first I thought, oh, well, maybe this is the right thing to do for the people of Nigeria. Then I thought, no, it's not. It's right for the small minority that are fighting.
Just down this way again.
However, some others felt it was just too dangerous. Miss Scotland, Dr. Paula Murphy, told organisers that with hundreds dead, she wanted out.
I just decided that I just did not want to be associated with people dying and riots, and I thought it was best to move out the country.
Dr. Murphy, who's just finished medical school, was backed up by other beauty queens.
And when it turned to something where there was anxiety, I felt that wasn't right. So we flew home, and we all agreed that that was the best thing to do.
But Rachel Hewlett feels sorry for the Nigerians.
I mean, I was standing with one of the security ladies in the waiting room for the plane. And she had tears in her eyes and she looked at me and she said, you know, we are all going to miss you. This is the best thing that could have ever happened to Nigeria.
Having got all these beauty contestants safely out of Nigeria, the next challenge for the organisers is where in London to hold not only a live show, but how to organise a live broadcast to 130 countries worldwide. Ian Sinclair, One News, London.
Well, coming up later on One News, why businesses dependent on the America's Cup are scanning the horizon for super yachts.
It's the final round of a doctor's legal fight over his love affair with a former patient.
Heading to a war zone, New Zealand sailors set off to hunt Al-Qaeda and the Taliban.
And we'll tell you why thin mothers can have babies that end up with big problems.
This week.
Who's that?
Huh?
That bloke Baldwin's with.
A new face.
I wouldn't mind knowing him. He looks a bit tasty from where I'm standing.
Arouses more than suspicion.
What's this? New bloke walks in the pub, you start acting like a couple of teenagers.
And turncoats.
You're bad. How they want an omelette?
Stir fighting talk.
Right, that's it. I've had enough of this.
That's more than words.
What's that? It's a pike. You mean you're going to be armed?
Coronation Street, tonight on One.
Vega Super Slim cheese slices are so low in fat, even our ads are slimmer. Vega Super Slim, the slimmer's cheese that's big on taste.